All right, it's time to catch up with Joey Wagner, talk about the Illinois side of things with our six-pack of Illini questions. Here we go, Joey. We are halfway through the season. Illinois is 5-1. Not a great feeling after a 50-49 overtime win against lowly Purdue, but they are 5-1, setting up a huge matchup against Michigan. So just what are your thoughts going into this game that, Josh Whitman's scheduled to be a big game, just from the outside of it with the historical presence of it. But now it's actually a top 25 matchup against the defending national champion.
Yeah, this has kind of turned into like best case scenario for Illinois to try to promote a big game. Well, you've seen that play out in a sellout. I mean, when Josh Whitman, and it sounds like he's been pushing for this for a few years, you kind of really got to hope your head football coach has got your program in a position where this is an attractive game. And it is, right? It's on CBS. It's Michigan. It's a sellout. Ranked versus ranked. You haven't seen that in Champaign since 2000. Is that right, Jeremy?
Insane. That's an insane stat. That Illinois has had a ranked versus ranked game since the year 2000.
That is so much worse than the waving that you do. That's horrible.
You not a Conan fan? Dude, I was all into that. That was sort of like Triumph the Insult Dog and Conan O'Brien in the late 1990s. It's awesome.
Shut it down. We're a minute and a half into this. It's over.
There's a group of guys my age to like 50 that are loving that reference. But you go ahead, Joe.
Your age is 50, Jeremy. We know that. Yeah, it's played out as well as Illinois could hope to this point. Obviously, you want to go in there and get a win, but you like fans, recruits, whatever the case is, you're not expecting Michigan to come in and blow you out. And frankly, when Michigan won the national championship and Illinois' season went the way it was last year, it's like, oh, this could be a problem. And it still may be. Michigan's running game is good. We'll get into that, Jeremy. But, man, this has played out as well as it could have possibly played out. I hate to be the weather guy, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be like 70-some-odd on Saturday. Like everything sets up perfectly for this game with the rededication, with all that Illinois has poured into it, to give Illinois a chance and to make for a heck of a good day of college football at Illinois. The only problem is Michigan does things really well that Illinois does not do very well. We will talk about that.
Sellout. Second sellout of the year, first time since 2009 that Illinois has sold out 2 games in the same season. You feel like you might have a chance, especially if you win this one, to have another chance to do it. But yeah, on the surface, the athletic director scheduling a powerhouse in Michigan, like pushing for that is kind of crazy, but it could be a great day. Could set up to be a great day for Illinois. So let's just dive into our 6-pack of questions, Joey, and we'll look back first. So question number 1. What concerns you most about the Illinois defense after that second half against Purdue? So what is lingering? What is your biggest lingering concern about that game?
Well, I don't want to harp on the same thing, which we'll get into in a second. My concern really kind of cropped up a little bit on Monday and talking with Aaron Henry. And he said, your first half was, you held him to 3 points. He said, I didn't do a very good job of adjusting in the second half. And I don't know that one half of bad football washes away what I think has been a much better defense this year, but I feel like kind of a key thing is kind of pull some of those adjustments. And we talked about new coverages with Aaron Henry and kind of the idea of when to show those and when to back off of those. Sounds like he's got a grip on, okay, this is what I didn't do right. But when he said, I just didn't adjust, and I'm paraphrasing, that's largely what he says, like, oh, you probably should have. And that is concerning, if it becomes a trend, because those adjustments made what I thought was the strength. We talked about this after the game, and that secondary looked kind of exposed. And it's like, that you got to have that. You've got to have a strength on this defense. And right now it's the secondary. And if you're not moving those chess pieces to put your team in the best spot to show that strength, that is a little bit concerning.
Yeah, I think my biggest lingering concern is during the game. I don't care what he said in the press conference. He's not going to give away everything. He's not going to say, well, this guy busted on this play. This guy busted on this play. There were certainly busts. But part of that is scheming and setting your guys up to succeed. And Aaron Henry owned that. But he didn't have an answer for what Purdue was doing. And the optimistic side of you just says, well, Ryan Walters knows this defense, knows
every pressure point, right?
Yeah, he knows the personnel, which staffs are going to know the personnel going into the game, but he knows it intimately. So that this was just a tough matchup, and you didn't have a lot of time to prepare for the quarterback. So it'll get better. And that over 6 games, the defense has been a bright spot of this team. So that would be the optimistic view. But the other side of it would be, teams are starting to figure this out, this Illinois defense out a little bit, and that you can run on them. You don't have to throw the ball down the field, where it gives them opportunities for takeaways. But also, Joey, you're starting to feel, does this group just lack talent? Is this defensive front not as, impactful as we thought it would be? Gabe Atkins and Seth Coleman been a little quiet, right? They can get some pressure, but you got to make those plays, and they're just not finishing some of those right now. Your weak side linebacker is overmatched. We talked about that. And your secondary for the first time this year really busted several coverages, right? Whether it was Matt Bailey or Torrey Cox, like, he gave up big plays. And when Xavier Scott wasn't on the field, it was pretty evident. So my optimistic one would be, you got out schemed for a game, and Aaron Henry can bounce back. But the fact that there wasn't that answer, and the fact that some of these guys just aren't making plays the last 2-3 weeks is a little bit concerning.
Yeah, I think the question that I've thought of over the course of the last couple of weeks when these takeaways have dried up is, who are you? What's the identity of this defense when you're not forcing takeaways in bunches? I know they went to Nebraska and won with just one really, really well-timed and big takeaway by Torrey Cox in the end zone. But what's your identity? What are you hanging your hat on? As we are good at X thing, if that takeaways can't be one of them, or if they haven't been one of them. And if you kind of zoom in and apply that to the scope of Michigan, what incentive does Michigan have to throw the ball much?
Yeah.
Whereas if that's the case, and you've got to punch that out, and like, the takeaways are a little harder when you've got to punch and rip, and you can't just go up and make a play on the ball. So I am concerned a little bit about that. I still, again, the defense is better than it was. And it was bad last year. So, like, that's not really some big celebratory statement that the defense is better than it was a year ago. I just wonder what it is when some of those turnovers, they were insane turnover numbers through the first 3 or 4 games. When those come back down to earth, what is this defense?
Yeah, and even though they gave up only 21 at Penn State and gave up only 3 in the first half against Purdue, they were getting bullied, right? Like they were getting bullied. So you were still able to do it, but it felt like you're getting a little lucky at times. And without the turnovers, like, again, what are you down to down? Can you force a team into these 3rd and longs? Guys just got to make plays. Like, if Matthew Bailey gets that pick, it's end game, and it's a different tune we're talking about right now. So the margins we talk about are really close, and I do think they're way closer than they were last year. I'm not at that level of concern yet with this defense, but I do have some concerns coming out of that Purdue game, backing up what happened against Penn State with the run defense. Let's go to number 2, Joey. What does this game against Michigan mean for Illinois?
I think right now there's a feeling about Illinois that when you look at the resume, and we've talked about the fact, I don't know, that resume building, even though Illinois is still very much kind of in this big conversation, and what could be, if the top end of what could be plays out, they could find themselves in that playoff. But I feel like you could poke holes in the resume of Illinois, right? Kansas didn't age very well. Nebraska shows it's not at that arrival moment quite yet. Purdue is Purdue. You beat EIU, you beat Central Michigan. A chance to beat Michigan and to really, kind of answer you to do it. You're going to have to answer one of your biggest questions, which is your run defense, right? So to beat Michigan, that gives you a resume. That gives you a headliner on your resume. And again, even if that doesn't mean anything for the college football playoffs, it makes you look a heck of a lot better on paper when people are like, hey, okay, yeah, Illinois took care of who they needed to take care of. They lost at Penn State, but hey, they beat Michigan. And I know Michigan isn't defending national champion level that we've seen Michigan, but that's a good win against a ranked team, a team that's still, a good football team. And it's going to be, a 8-9 win team at the low end, probably. Like, that just boosts a little bit more. And it makes you look a little bit more real as a program. Because right now, you could look, and I don't know if we've talked about this on the pod. You and I have certainly driven around who knows where and talked about, like, Rutgers, I think, probably is a little inflated. You look at a team like that, you look at some of these other teams that you could poke some pretty significant holes in their resume. Illinois is not all that different. So beating Michigan gives you a little bit more of a fortress against someone trying to come in and poke those holes in what you've done so far.
It's a great point, Joey, because Illinois is 5-1. They're number 22 in the AP top 25. And you look at, metrics, right? Like ESPN's Football Power Index has Illinois number 57 in the country, number 13 in the Big Ten, right? So that is below teams like Nebraska, Minnesota, Maryland. So I agree with you. Like, I think the Nebraska win is still a good win.
Yeah.
I can't wait for the Nebraska-Indiana game. I think we're going to learn a lot about those two teams this weekend, and I still think Nebraska's a good road win for Illinois, but Kansas hasn't aged that well. You only beat them by 6 points, by the way. Penn State, even though you had a chance to tie that game late, it didn't feel like they were in that game, right?
The eye test told a different story than the scoreboard.
Sure. And then Purdue it didn't feel like a great win, even though it is a win. So I do think this is a chance for Illinois to kind of solidify itself and be like, yes, we are a good team. And we are a team that should be in some of these conversations. But obviously there's so much going around this game, the sellout, the 100-year anniversary of the dedication of the Red Grange, 5-touchdown performance, 4 in the first 12 minutes. So this is kind of I wrote this in my preview. This game is kind of a toast to the past, Joey, but it's also a potential celebration for a brighter future, right? Like, this is a potential moment for Illinois. I thought Penn State was that, but you've set yourself up again by finding a way to beat Purdue, to have the national stage and to have, people talk about you if you win. And while I still don't think there's a team that probably gets to 10 wins, if you win, there's a path to that. There's certainly a path to 9 or 10 wins, and a path to 9 or 10 wins means there is a path to being in college football playoff contention. So, based on the eye test, I don't think this team is there. Based on the metrics, I don't think they're there. You beat a team like Michigan that is a good team, that is strong in the trenches, that has a bunch of first-round draft picks, then you put yourself in that. If you lose, you're probably a team that's fighting for 7 or 8 wins and fighting to get to Nashville or Florida, right, for a bowl game, which is kind of what I think the expectation is for now. But this is a fun opportunity. You kind of get to wash the taste out of your mouth against Purdue. And let's be honest, Michigan, this is the best opportunity you've had to beat Michigan in a while. I know they probably should have won 2 years ago, but this Michigan team is more vulnerable. Even though they're really strong in the trenches, they got a bunch of talent. They can't throw the ball, and they struggle to defend the pass. So there are opportunities for you to potentially win this game. There's reasons to have hope going into this game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great chance to get a Michigan team. Maybe kind of, if you're Brett Bielema, maybe avenge what you thought should have been a win in Ann Arbor. I sent a message to you guys about this earlier this week, and maybe it's just because it's on CBS, which is a big deal. It is. Even if you're not a huge college football fan, if you're not an Illinois fan, if you're not a Michigan fan, you can fire up PBS or CBS on 2:30 on Saturday, and you're going to see some football, correct? Like that's part of life.
It does not have the same resonance of like 2010 when, it was a different channel, it was all that. But when Brad Nessler is on the call, it's a little different. You sound
yeah. Like YouTube TV, these streaming services have probably maybe lessened the, oh my gosh, you're on one of the 3 network television channels. Like,
put in channel 2 here.
Right. Like, it's probably lessened that. But you're right. Brad Nessler's voice, the CBS logo, the music, it feels like it's a big stage. And maybe you catch an eyeball that you wouldn't have caught. And all of a sudden people say, wait a minute, Illinois, like, why are you down on them? They had Michigan do, they did this to Michigan. I watched it, even if they hadn't seen anything about Illinois before. So
But the biggest thing is the opponent, right? It's the defending national champion. It's Michigan. It's the maize and blue. It's the winged helmets.
Yes. Yeah, all of that comes together. Even if the CBS game doesn't have that same, meaning now as it did 20, 30 years ago in terms of just availability to watch it, all those pieces still come together. And there is something, regardless of how many different ways there are to watch channels, there is something about 2:30 slot, CBS, Brad Nessler, here it goes. And like there's a lot of value to that. And I think that sets up really well for Illinois to keep pushing this program forward. And that's where it is right now is, how high can that get pushed forward this year? But this is a big chance to, even if it's just one win, it's a chance to push yourself forward just in terms of perception.
Absolutely. I know you guys have heard me talk about Home Field Apparel a lot, but there's a reason. I have some of these shirts from Home Field Apparel, and they are a premium collegiate apparel brand based in Indianapolis. And what I love about them is they're focused on creating incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. So go to homefieldapparel.com and check out their Illini gear. The Flying Illini t-shirt, I love. If they have any bomber jackets, go check those out. But you see all of these vintage designs that are great. They kind of stand out in a crowd, but also these are comfortable, well-fitting. They're not the boxy kind of ones you get at the random department store. No, these are well-fitted, comfortable t-shirts and apparel. So go check it out at homefieldapparel.com. Go to the drag down menu, click on Illini, and you'll see all of these great shirts, including Orange Crush, old school Fighting Illini basketball shirts, the Flying Illini t-shirt with the great winged logo, Script Illini gear, including t-shirts, hoodies, an orange ringer tee, the 2004-05 Illinois basketball shirts so you can relive those glory days, but also they have great hoodies, great crew necks, great Illini football gear, including the 80s Illini helmet on there. If you're an old school sweatshirt guy, they got those. If you're a quarter zip guy, they got those. If you want a women's tank there with the Script Illini, they got that. So go to homefieldapparel.com to check out all the great gear they have there. If you're not an Illini fan, they have more than 180 plus growing list of schools. So you can check out all the gear from all over the country. And right now, use code Illini24 for 15% off at homefieldapparel.com. That's Illini24 for 15% off all the gear at homefieldapparel.com. All right, number 3, I'll start us off here, Joey. What gives you the most optimism about this matchup against Michigan? It's that there's a big passing game discrepancy here, Joey. Illinois has a quarterback, and Michigan has a quarterback problem. Right now, Illinois is 15th in the country in passing efficiency. Michigan is 130th. How that's possible at Michigan, I do not know, but they have a quarterback issue right now. Michigan's leading wide receiver has 13 catches for 78 yards. We are 6 games into the season, Joey, and that is possible. That's like some Rutgers stuff. Illinois.
We have taken way too many shots at Rutgers.
Passing attack for years, right? I mean, Illinois 2017. Illinois has 4 wide receivers with 120 plus yards. Hank Beatty would be leading Michigan in receiving yards by a wide receiver. Colston Loveland's got a lot. But he would be leading Michigan wide receivers by about 50 yards. Elsie has 66 yards. So that takes you in there. Illinois has a quarterback that can go win you a game. Jack Tuttle, I think, is brought in to be the journeyman quarterback, the Andy Dalton that just kind of gives you a chance and can at least throw the ball downfield compared to Alex Orji. But also, Luke Altmaier and this wide receivers against this pass defense. This passing defense isn't great for Michigan. They're allowing 260 passing yards per game. They've allowed 12 passing touchdowns. So despite that defensive front, which has 4 or 5 pros, despite having Will Johnson, a top 5 pick at corner, they have issues at nickel. They have issues at the other corner spot where Jair Hill is kind of trial by fire right now. So I think Illinois is going to have opportunities to throw the ball as long as they can protect Luke Altmaier just a little bit.
Yeah, that is. I mean, I hate to repeat everything that you just said, but you're being optimistic. That's why. It's because Luke Altmaier is playing at a level. I was having a conversation with a buddy the other day, and we were trying to figure out, and we've talked about this on the pod a little bit, where he fits in the Big Ten hierarchy. And I don't know that I'm ready to go 2, right? That's a pretty big step ahead, but I'm very comfortably in the top 5, and that's probably being a little conservative about where he fits in all of this. And
I was looking this up earlier today. So just PFF, right? Their offensive grade. So that takes into account running. Mm-hmm. Curtis Rourke at Indiana is 1, Drew Aller 2, Dylan Gabriel 3, Billy Edwards at Maryland 4, Luke Altmaier is number 5, ahead of Will Howard, ahead of Miller Moss, ahead of Will Rogers. So, and then you look at like passing efficiency. I think he's number 5 in the Big Ten. So I have no doubt. Like he's a top 5 Big Ten guy for me.
Yeah. And when you have that, against a team with some vulnerabilities, even as good as Will Johnson is, that just tells me one of Pat Bryant or Zachary Franklin's going to have a quiet day, and Luke Altmaier is going to, and a Brad Underwood is on maybe matchup hunt elsewhere. And maybe that's you're moving. Maybe this is Zachary Franklin and the slot siren, or Pat Bryant and the slot siren that you see, and you're just trying to matchup hunt some of these guys and make those plays. But Illinois has a quarterback. They're going into this with the best quarterback on the field considerably. And that's going to give them a chance. Now, we'll get into what's next here and our 4th question, which is going to be much less optimistic. But Luke Altmaier, man, I feel like we were high on him before the season, and we were. It's clear to us, or clear to me, I don't know about you, that maybe we were still not as high as we needed to be, because this is a really significant jump that he's made this year.
I couldn't understand anybody that saw him play last year. Like that guy doesn't have it. Like the talent was clear last year. The big question was, how much does he improve as a decision maker? How much does he improve with just how quickly he processes things? And those things have improved. Now he needs to take better care of the ball. He's fumbled in 3 straight games. And those fumbles have been costly for Illinois, obviously against Purdue. Not all his fault, right? Like the line's got to protect better. The running backs have to protect better, but he still has to get 2 hands on the ball when he's in the pocket or he's waiting that long. His mental alarm's got to go off. Like those are things you still got to work on with him. But this is his second year as a starter, and he's taken a massive leap in all of those areas that we had questions about. And he is elevating this team. That was my question. Is he going to elevate this team? Boy, has he done it. He gave you a chance at Penn State. He went and won the game at Nebraska against Kansas, and he went and won the game against Purdue. So does Michigan have that guy? If Michigan and Illinois are tied in the fourth quarter, I feel pretty dang good if I'm Illinois, because I feel like I got the guy who can go win you the game either with his legs or his arm.
Yeah, first of all, with the fumbles, I would imagine they've had to work. Like this week has to have been about where Luke Altmaier is holding that football, because every defensive line, every edge coach in the country who's playing Illinois is telling his guys to swat at that thing because he has it out there fairly vulnerably.
Yeah, could have been 2 fumbles too. Could have been 2.
Well, I think it was 2 fumbles. It could have been called 2 fumbles. I mean, let's be honest, that was one replay angle away from this being a whole different.
Yeah, so let's not say Illinois doesn't get any breaks, right? The fact that was called no fumble on the field was changed the game. Like if that was called a fumble, it would have stayed a fumble.
Absolutely. And at this point, I'd forgotten what my
sorry.
point. No, you're fine. It clearly wasn't important.
Well, let me get to this too, because like Will Johnson, I don't know if he's quite what Devin Witherspoon was as a senior. He's obviously very talented. He's got 2 pick sixes. He's going to be a top 5 pick, most likely, at least a top 10 pick. But he struggled to tackle a little bit this year, but he's really good. And I would imagine he's going to get Pat Bryant for most of this game. So that'll be fun to watch. It's a great opportunity for Pat Bryant to improve his NFL stock. But the other matchups in that secondary, like Jair Hill has struggled. He's got a 73 PFF grade, but he has struggled in some big games. He allowed 7 receptions on 9 targets, 89 yards and a touchdown against Washington, against Texas, which obviously is loaded. He gave up 8 receptions on 11 targets for 105 yards and a touchdown. And their nickel guy, Zeke Berry, has really struggled. 55 PFF grade. He's gotten attacked over and over and over again. So a guy like Colin Dixon, or whether it's Zakari or Pat in the slot, I think Illinois is going to try and exploit that matchup because they lost Mike Sanderstill, who was like their guy last year on the defense. You could tell he's the leader, the emotional leader. That's been a big downgrade for them. So, the rest of this wide receiver core, I'm really interested to see what Franklin, Dixon, and even maybe a Hank Beatty can do.
Yeah, Franklin, I don't want to pick on Jair Hill. Illinois recruited the heck out of that kid, and he's still a young defensive back. And as we've seen at Illinois, being a young defensive back, it's a tough task. Gets compounded a little bit when you're going up against a really savvy, veteran, old wide receiver. If that's the matchup that you see a lot with Zakari Franklin, that you tip your hand to Zakari Franklin on that because he's been around. He knows how to find these little wins in the course of a route, and comes with experience. So I think that's a really interesting matchup outside of the talent, which is they're both really talented players. Just that old manship Zakari Franklin could have, and we'll see if he can tap into that. One more point that I wanted to make when you said I don't know how anyone could watch Luke Altmaier and have him ranked wherever he was ranked in the preseason. They didn't watch. If you had Luke Altmaier ranked below, even going into the season, we could just say 10, right? And I know that looks like it's low now, but think back to where it was at the beginning of the season. Yeah, you didn't watch Luke Altmaier last year. The interceptions were there. Yeah, that's exactly what you saw. 10 interceptions. Maybe you saw the fumble at Purdue. Completion rate didn't jump off the screen, but you just stat hunted that. You didn't watch how that actually looked on the football field if you ranked him that low.
The other stat I want to give, Zeke Berry, their nickel, during the last 3 games, all obviously Big Ten opponents here, he's allowed 20 receptions on 28 targets for 296 yards and 4 touchdowns. So that's not like Michigan level defense outside of Will Johnson right now in that secondary. And they lost Rod Moore, their safety, to an ACL, who's probably a future NFL player, big player for them. So anything else you want to add on the optimism side?
No, let's get to the other side of this coin because there's a lot there.
All right, I'll let you run with it. Number 4, what concerns you most about the Michigan's offense? And I said, let's run with it. No pun intended there.
Yeah, they run the ball really, really well. And that's a problem for Illinois because Illinois doesn't stop the run particularly well at all. And then you factor in the fact that I understand they said Jack Tuttle is going to be the quarterback, and I have no reason – I don't cover them. I have no reason to sit here and think, oh, are you sure about that? But I do wonder if he's going to be the quarterback and if he's going to be the quarterback for long because Orji can run. Illinois has struggled. They just have the defensive line, the outside linebackers, mobile quarterbacks have given Illinois fits. Maybe the help is that you don't have to worry so much about the ability to throw the ball downfield like you had to worry about with the Jalen Daniels. We'll see. But I really worry about Illinois' ability to stop Michigan on the ground in this game. And you go through and look at it, Michigan rush yards a game, 193, that's right, or 191, right in the middle of the Big Ten. But Illinois opponent rush yards per game, it's fourth worst in the conference. You're only better than Purdue, Rutgers, and USC. That's just not a good recipe. A team that can really milk the clock, can move the ball. I thought Purdue could have run the ball a ton more. They just got behind. They got behind early. Kansas really inexplicably threw at odd times. Penn State inexplicably threw at odd times. If Michigan won't get bored running the football, I'm concerned about Illinois' ability to stop that. And that obviously plays into keeping the best quarterback on the field off the field in Luke Altmaier.
Yeah, Illinois has allowed 239 rushing yards each of the last two games. And as you said, Kansas should have run for 239 yards, right? And Penn State probably could have run for 300 if they really, really wanted to. Michigan has two running backs who will probably be on NFL rosters next year. Like Donovan Edwards, it amazes me he hasn't been as good the last 2 years because as a sophomore, he looked like a first-round pick to me. He is so explosive. And while he's not consistent between the tackles, he is a threat. If you miss him, he's probably going to run by you and into the end zone. So that's what concerns me about him. But then Mullings can just break tackles. Amazing this guy was a linebacker last year. But he's a potential NFL draft pick as well. The one thing is their offensive line is not as good as last year. And I think Penn State's offensive line was better than Michigan's. So, but still, like Purdue's offensive line stinks and they ran all over you. So a lot of that was the quarterback, I understand, but Devin Mockabee was able to break tackles and do what he did. So listen, I think I'd rather play Alex Orji because I don't have to really worry about the pass. I can just go man-to-man and stack the box and try and tackle really well. But yeah, Jack Tuttle going in there, he doesn't scare me either. So you got to be able to do it. But the linebackers have to be better, right? They have to read better. They have to be more physical. But up front, I got to see more from Dennis Briggs Jr. and Gabe Akis and Seth Coleman. Like, I want my bare front out there. I want the 5 defensive linemen out there, Alec Bryant out there. This has got to be their best game because it just feels like they haven't made enough plays the last couple of weeks, Joey. And this is one where they need them to.
Yeah, they need them to. And again, on some of those option plays, even if Orji doesn't start, Michigan would be foolish to not have packages out there to have him on the field. And that's going to be contained in option plays that we saw Ryan Brown have some success on, that we've seen mobile quarterbacks have success. So that's, even if the sack opportunities aren't there for a Michigan team that's probably not interested in throwing the ball a whole lot, Seth Coleman, Gabe Akis, Alec Bryant, Joe Barner, keeping the quarterbacks contained, making the right plays, even if that doesn't look like a ton of TFLs or sacks, keeping that in check is huge and force Michigan into passing downs where it's not comfortable, where at least it doesn't look particularly comfortable.
Let me give you one more. It's Colston Loveland. He's a first-round draft pick at tight end. He's really, really good. The only reason his numbers are a little bit down this year is because he doesn't have a quarterback that can throw to him. 33% of their targets this year go to their tight end, number 18, Colston Loveland, who was awesome in the national championship game last year. But Matthew Bailey struggled against Max Clare, right? He busted 2 big coverages, gave up 3 receptions or 109 yards just to Max Clare. The interesting thing is Bailey did pretty well against Tyler Warren, who I think is just as good as Loveland, if not better at this point in time. And we've seen what Tyler Warren's done since then, but Warren only had 4 catches for 34 yards. Bailey only gave up 1 catch on 2 targets. I think he had a pass breakup on one of them. So Matthew Bailey's got a huge matchup against Loveland because if you're going to go man-to-man a lot, that strong safety is usually the guy on him. So a big game for Matthew Bailey to bounce back.
Yeah, he needs to bounce back because Max Clare looked like one of the best tight ends in the league last week, and Colston Loveland doesn't need a lot of help to do that. He is one of the best, probably 2 tight ends in the Big Ten right now. That's a huge matchup because, as you mentioned, with the receiver stats, they don't go a lot elsewhere. Like Colston Loveland is their guy, and he's been around. He can do that. It's a big chance for Matthew Bailey. I don't know if they're going to switch anything up. I think we should bring that up because I don't know how many options sit right there to mix up. I understand the weak side linebacker. We've seen people say, why don't they play Matthew Bailey there? Physically, that's not a mid-season move. If you want to do that takes months of body build up and to change. And maybe it's something you explore.
Yeah, like you and I have brought this up. Like, hey, offseason move is Matthew Bailey turned into a weak side linebacker because I think he'd be better than what they have there, but he does need like 10 or 15 pounds, and that's an off season of strength gain. So I don't think that is a mid-season fix. Now, can you go more 5-1-5 kind of scheme wise and get your best 11 on the field? I think that's important because I don't think your second linebacker right now is one of your best 11 on the field, but they just need those guys to play better. That's it. And Aaron Henry needs a scheme that puts those guys in the best positions to succeed. They gave themselves a chance against Penn State with their scheme. I will give Aaron Henry a lot of credit for that. Like, I thought he's really disciplined and just kind of being like, we're going to try and keep everything in front of us. They weren't able to do that against Purdue. So I think they got away from, and he said it, kind of got away from what we do well.
Yeah, I'm glad. For as much as my concern about the adjustments in the first point that we talked about, I'm glad that Aaron Henry really kind of said to us that, hey, I got to ask us what got us here. What was good enough to get us to this point, and that is keeping things in front. Make teams put together long drives. Make teams sustain over the course of a consistent drive without chunk plays to get down there and put themselves in field goal range or try to find their way to the end zone. This has been a good recipe for Illinois. The stats obviously are going to skew in terms of yardage, but if you can keep them trying for 3 with your quarterback on the other side, I think he'll take that.
Yeah, through 5 games, what I thought about this defense was it was pretty fundamentally sound and disciplined. And then that all went out the window in the second half against Purdue. So if they can get back to that, they're going to give their team a chance. Number 5, Joey, what concerns you most about Michigan's defense?
Yeah, the front, kind of all of that situation.
All those first-round picks.
Yeah, it's a really good front. I'm glad you asked Bart Miller the other day, but Penn State, another obviously very, very good defensive front. That feels like a twitchy kind of a freak zone, right? In terms of what they're able to do. I'm not trying to act like Michigan doesn't have twitchy or freakish athletes, because it does, but that's just a brute offense or defensive line. And the Illinois offensive line hasn't shown me to this point that I would feel comfortable with them against a defensive front that is as good as Michigan is, at least not consistently. And you factor in the fact that your starting running back, you and I assume, is out. Brett Bielema hasn't said word for word that Caden Fagan is out, but everything he said makes it sound like it's going to be a little bit. And he said as much on Saturday. So you combine that with just a really good defensive front that Penn State has. And, I guess you could glass half full and say, well, that just means our quarterback's got to throw it if you're Illinois fans, right? And sure. But we've seen what happens if teams and really good defensive fronts can pin their ears back and go after Luke Altmaier, and that can be a problem in and of itself. Yeah,
I asked Bart, I know the talent is similar, right? Penn State, Abdul Carter. I just saw ESPN have number 3. I think he's the best player Illinois is going to play all year, to be honest with you. But Michigan might have the next 3 best defenders that Illinois go up against. Mason Graham is a consensus top 10 NFL draft prospect, number 55, 6'3", 320 pounds. Kenneth Grant is a consensus first-round draft pick. Some people have him top 10. Number 78, Illinois recruited him out of Merrillville. 6'3", 340 pounds, nose tackle. But he's insanely athletic, too. He's what they look like. Josiah Stewart on the edge is one of the best Big Ten defenders so far this season. Tied for the Big Ten lead with 5 sacks, has 19 pressures. Oh, and then you got Will Johnson on the back end. But yeah, and they got 3 other dudes on that defensive line. They're going to be NFL players. Nothing you've seen so far this year says that Illinois will be able to, one, impose their will or have a ton of success. So I'm just wondering, how much have they improved? Because I do think against Purdue, they played pretty well, but Purdue's defensive line isn't all that good. Against Penn State, they really got home in that fourth quarter. So, Brandon Henderson, does he make his second start, Joey, at right guard? Or do you go back to Isaiah Chrysler going up against a Mason Graham or Kenneth Grant? Because that guy has done it for 30 games in the Big Ten. So I'll be interested with that. But, Josh Kreutz obviously is a little undersized, but he has been playing well here recently. My biggest concerns are on the interior, because when you're going up against Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham against an interior that's been inconsistent all the year, I think you're just going to have to run a lot to the outside. I do like what Barry Lunny did last game, kind of getting the wide receivers out in the flat. That was kind of an extension of the run game. Getting Luke Altmaier involved in the run game, I think, is going to be very important as well, because you still have to have a counter to throwing the ball downfield, right? You can't just let them sit back in zone coverage. You have to find a way to nickel and dime your way to get ahead of the sticks. And I think that's the way you're going to have to do it. I don't think you're going to be run up the middle against Michigan. You're going to have to get to the edges.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And we should say Wink Martindale, longtime NFL defensive coordinator, he's a good coordinator. He's the guy who is, this is going to be a good challenge for Barry Lunny to go up against him and see what he can scheme around. I'm with you. I liked using those short passes to Zachary Franklin, Pat Bryant, whatever the case may be, as extensions of the run game to roll out, get those guys in space, get your best athletes in space. I hope Barry Lunny goes back to that, because I thought that worked really, really well. And against an interior that's not going to give up a lot of yardage, a lot of room to breathe, I think that's an important thing to do. And you would like Caden Fagan in this game. Again, not the expectation, but I think Josh McCray's been much more decisive as a runner lately. But Caden's got a little bit more pop to match the size if you've got to get outside, if you've got to get to those edges. And I know someone will say, what about Khalil Valentine or Aiden Lawford? We just haven't seen that consistently with those two. That's where I think you'll miss.
How much can you play Khalil Valentine against this pass rush?
It's really concerning. It's like, for as much fun as he is to watch bounce to the outside or to really, use that speed and that quickness. And there's all the talent there. We see all of that.
He's going to be good.
He's going to be good. Of course he is. Now, we've heard that on the record, obviously, off the record, kind of buzzing around the Smith Center. They're really, really high on what his future can be. But we've seen what happens when running backs struggle in pass pro. And it's tough. And then when you factor in the fact that, oh, by the way, it's Michigan and the strength of its defense is its front, that doesn't seem to me like a recipe where you would trot Khalil Valentine a lot out there. We'll see if that plays true.
Yeah, and listen, I love what Josh McCray did last week, especially in the pass game. And I'm wondering if they get involved in the screen game a little bit to take advantage of Michigan maybe being aggressive, getting after Luke Altmaier a bit. But Caden can kind of make something out of nothing. And that's not Josh. Josh hits doubles, right? And he can hit doubles all day. You can score a lot of points doing that. But yeah, missing that Caden, he's one of your most talented players, and he will be missed.
Hey, but to your point from earlier, doubles against the Michigan defense on the run game, I don't know what that looks like, because the double against Michigan is probably different. Like, that's like kind of putting one in the short outfield and the outfielder plays it wrong. A double against Purdue is smoking it to the wall, right? Like, so what's a double look like against Michigan? I don't know, but there's a lot of value in hitting a double for 4 yards, a carry, and to get those sticks moving a little bit. So I do think that's important, because you're right. You can't just say, forget it, we're just going to throw it, because that's what we do the best. As a team like Michigan, a coordinator like Wink Martindale, they're going to get after you up front. They're going to sit in zone on the back end.
All right, let's wrap this up with a little bit bigger picture one. We're entering the second half of the season, Joey. So give me a player you're interested to see more from during the second half of the season, and why.
Oh, that's Colin Dixon.
Ooh, I like
it. You've seen a good bit. You've seen his production has slowly stepped up here in the last couple weeks. I love his blend of size. I love his blend of speed. He's got power. I think he's a really good complement to what you've got on the outside with Pat Bryant, with Zachary Franklin. Those two deserve all the targets they get and more, because they're as good as they are. They're playing at the level that they are. But I'm just really fascinated by Colin Dixon and really the way they can use him too. I think there's ways that, similar to what we've seen with Bryant Franklin, to get him those short ones, let him bulldoze his way with that power and speed down the field. I think that's starting to pick up. I don't know how quickly it's gaining steam in terms of stats and production on that front, but you've seen it a little bit more and more, and I think there's a lot more to unlock there as a really good complement to their two outside receivers.
I don't know how great I feel about it this week, but I do want to see this guy starting more games, and that's Brandon Henderson. He's the future, right? Zach Chrysler is a senior. Josh Geske has struggled with consistency this year. Brandon Henderson has to be an anchor of your offensive line in 2025. So while you're still playing for 2024, I think he's going to struggle with consistency, but I want to see that athleticism and that power, and I want to get him experience so that he can build that up and then he can peak at the end of this season. And that can lead you into being like, yep, that is definitely our starting guard, or maybe he's a starting tackle, but sounds like they're liking him more at guard at least lately. I think I want to see him. I want to see him struggle. I want to see him succeed. I want to see him go through the growth process moving forward, because I just think the ceiling is needed at the guard positions right now, and I need an anchor for next year. When you lose J.C. Davis, who I think has been really solid, if you can have Kreutz and Henderson and Priestley moving forward, I think you have something to build around, and then you add some pieces around that.
Yeah, I agree. The more we talk about Brandon Henderson, we thought he was going to be the left tackle of the future, but as you mentioned, it seems like over the course of time that they've had him on campus, they like him more and more on that interior. But you're right. He's a guy that is your future. You would like him to start for the next 2 years after this season, and we'll see how this closes up for the rest of the year. But he was a really big get for them, the guy who came in and really impressed. I know he was kind of the third, I guess, quote unquote, in terms of the ranking services, those East St. Louis trio, Miles McVay to Alabama, Paris Patterson to Arkansas.
Yeah.
Arkansas, then obviously Brandon Henderson was previously committed to Iowa State, but Illinois from the get-go has felt really, really good about getting him on campus. I think you've seen some other potential tackle prospects come in recent classes who could make you feel a little bit better long-term about Henderson moving to one of those guards instead of being an anchor, a bookend anchor at one of those two sides. But yeah, the vibe has been good for him. I know Bart Miller told you he expected struggles. You expect that when you put a sophomore out there in his first career start. If they put him out there again, I don't know. You and I don't know that they will or they won't do that, because Zach Chrysler performed pretty well in his 30 some odd snaps that he had against Purdue. It's going to be a tall order against this Michigan defensive front, but it's one of those things that a year from now, when we're talking to Brandon Henderson, and it's, hey, that Michigan game's kind of tough, huh? But what'd you learn from that when you're going up against them? Same thing we thought in the spring when his first spring as a freshman was Keith Randolph, Johnny Newton-Gayback, and Seth Coleman. You just don't necessarily want to see those struggles play out in a big game like this if you're Illinois. But, man, I think the ceiling's really high for him.
Yeah, and I think you can make room for both him and Zach Chrysler, and maybe Brandon Henderson relieves Josh Geske at times, right? Like I think all those guys can get meaningful reps moving forward. All right, Joey, I do want to add one more guy I'd like to see more without the club over his hand, James Kreutz. Yeah. He needs to be better. He needs to read things better, but they obviously need some more answers at linebacker. So I'm wondering if, he's more the Mike guy, but does he get any more reps at linebacker? Because they certainly need some more speed and some power at that position.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was thinking as we were talking, we both mentioned offensive guys. Who on the defensive side that you and I would point to? James Kreutz comes to mind. Malachi Hood is very interesting to me in terms of his athleticism and his length, but we just really haven't gotten the indication that it's necessarily close for him.
Which usually it's a reliability thing, right? Like, can you count on him to do the job and to be where he needs to be? I get it. Fans are just like, oh, get somebody more talented in there, but you want somebody who knows what they're doing when they get out there, so there's not a huge bust. But I get it, coming after Purdue, there are busts anyway. So,
do we put Terrence Brooks on this list? Are we good with what we see from the Illinois corners?
I had him on my list. I don't think I'll get into it with my picks to click. I'll get into it there.
Oh, that's
spicy.
Thank God that's next. Who would want to wait for 20 minutes to get to that?
Let's get into it. Picks to click. Let's go. I'll let you pick offense first, Joey. Then I'll go defense. By the way, we completely whiffed.
Oh yeah.
I had the offensive line, which I thought was okay, and Gabe Hackus. That didn't work out. Joey, you had Caden Fagan, who didn't play, and Miles Scott. So I think we just completely whiffed on that one.
Yeah, you came closer to
the offensive line.
Yeah, maybe you got on base. We could say that. Trying to figure out took a walk. We're getting to the point that we're gonna have to Isaiah Williams, Luke Altmaier.
Like, for me to say Luke, like, if you're gonna pick Luke Altmaier, it's gonna be like he's throwing for 4 touchdowns. Like, that's what it has to be at this point.
Yeah, that feels a
You
little
doing it?
bit. No, I'm not. I sure as hell want to, but I'm not. I'm going to go with Zachary Franklin because I do really like the Will Johnson idea on Pat Bryant. And I think if you can get Zachary Franklin on someone who isn't Will Johnson, I think there's a lot of room for Illinois to win that matchup. And of course, Luke Altmaier getting the ball makes me feel even better about that. But I just wonder about this team's ability to run. And if you can't run traditionally, can you, as we talked about before, make some of those short passes in the flat? Zachary Franklin's a really good option for that. Can you make those extensions of the run game kind of supplement it that way? And I think there's a big chance for him.
All right, Joey. I'm all aboard the train. It is Colin Dixon time. It is time.
Ooh. All right.
I put out the stats, researching what I did with Zeke Berry and how much he struggled, giving up 20 receptions, 296 yards, 2 touchdowns with what over the last 3 games with what Will Johnson is at that one corner spot. Like, I just feel like Pat Bryant's going to have a tough matchup, and I think he'll win some against Will, but I think you're going to throw away from Will Johnson because he has 2 pick sixes and is a future top 10 draft pick. So I do think Zachary is going to get a lot of action, going to get a lot of targets going up against Jair Hill and some of those guys. But, man, their weak spot in this defense is really the middle of the field with the slot and the safeties. And I feel like Colin Dixon is starting to earn some trust. He's starting to get some targets. He's got 8 targets over the last 4 games here, 7 targets over the last 4 games with 6 catches here, 130 yards. I think he's going to earn some more of those targets, and maybe he's one of those guys who they move in motion, get him in the flat, Joey. They did once, and he had a big gain with that. So I think he can be an extension of the run game. Wouldn't be a surprise with a 5-catch game for Colin Dixon and maybe a few big plays to move the sticks. And maybe – has he gotten a touchdown yet? Maybe the first touchdown.
I'd love to see that. I had honorable mention in my brain, Tanner Arkin, because I think you're seeing –
I was going to say you're going Tanner Arkin to start this thing up.
Well, I do think you're seeing a little bit more of that pass-catching ability come to light. I still – obviously, he's not what I would describe as a dynamic pass catcher, and you probably want him blocking in a lot of ways, but you're seeing those steps for him come up a little bit more and more. It's hard to pivot away from Zachary Franklin. I also noticed I really was channeling my Tony Romo lately with, like, you pick one, and I'm like, oh, Jim, I don't know. I gotta cut back on that a little bit.
Hey, CBS game. Thinking of Romo.
Just practicing, just getting everyone in the tune for what Sunday is going to be if you're watching CBS football on Sunday.
Well, my Bears are going to have a Romo game coming up with Commanders and Bears, so I'm getting ready for it. So you're
that got flexed. We're getting off. That got Commanders and Bears has turned into a primetime game. What a world in the year of Lord! What a world!
I've really thought about just going off just out of left field and taking Aiden Lawfrey here because I just want to hear what Thad Ward's comp is. Like, okay, we heard Josh McCray had there's a 4-man band at running back, and he was a sax solo for Josh McCray. So what is Aiden Lawfrey? Is he a flautist? Oh, he's a drummer. Okay.
Oh, he's beating the hell out of the drums. Oh, yeah. I don't know why. That probably doesn't even fit with the band that Thad Ward has put together here in the running back room, but he is unquestionably just drumming like crazy.
Would Khalil be the flute because he's the speedy guy, the smaller guy? Would Jordan Anderson be the trombone? Like, is that what we're doing here?
How much time have you spent since hearing that quote trying to dive into this?
I think Aiden Lawfrey's the trumpet. I think he's a strong trumpet. So maybe they're playing the trumpet today.
I think he's the drums. I'm not sure I understand the makeup of bands here, but I'm putting him on the drums.
All right. Defensive pick to click. I teased you. It would be the greatest storyline. I texted you this yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
One, we're looking for storylines. We like talking to different people, writing fun stories. It'd be great if Terrence Brooks had a moment in this game and helps Illinois, and I'm just saying this from a writer's perspective, and helped Illinois beat the team that Illinois beat to get him. Michigan really wanted Terrence Brooks to play what Jair Hill is playing, and they are struggling at that cornerback spot. So that would be great. But looking at this wide receiver group for Michigan, it is very small. Tyler Morris is 5'10". Samaj Morgan is 5'10". I'm going with a bounce-back Torrey Cox game with a big play, maybe the takeaway, Joey, because they need quicker corners out there guarding some of these guys. And if you force Jack Tuttle to throw, I think you're going to get a chance at some interceptions. He's thrown 7 interceptions, 7 touchdowns in his 5 or 6 career starts so far. So I'll go Torrey Cox. Illinois needs a takeaway. So one of these guys got to step up, and I think Torrey Cox has the speed to stick with these Michigan guys.
That's a fun one. I want to bring that up. Corey Parker's interviews on our YouTube page. I would recommend anyone who hasn't had coffee this morning to listen to Corey Parker talk about his defensive back. But he said that big play, he said his eyes were in the right spot. His feet just weren't, and he just kind of over accelerated. Corey gave a really good breakdown for what went wrong on that double move for anyone interested in that. I think I'm gonna go up front because I think you've got to figure out something up there. I think Dylan Rosiak, if you're talking takeaways, we've seen him punch a football loose a time or two. He's also the meanest nice guy I've ever talked to. This feels like a game that he would be kind of angry, because I think he's typically angry on Saturdays, and people have challenged his defensive front. He's a team captain on this team, and people have challenged that defensive front. We've talked about it a lot on here. Certainly they've been aware of what Michigan can do and what Illinois really hasn't shown it can do. This feels like I don't want to say an FU game, because that's probably a little too dramatic from Dylan Rosiak. But when you're trying to talk about creating takeaways, I'll take the guy who's forced them out, and the guy who's probably going to have a lot of opportunities to wrap up and tackle a little more clean than we've seen him tackle throughout these first 6 games.
All right, 3.5 points. That sound right to you, Joey? Illinois underdog? That sounds right to me.
So that's really 6.5 when you factor in home field, give or take. Yeah.
I mean, better in the trenches. I love this matchup. It's Michigan is considerably better in the trenches, especially their defensive front, right? And Illinois got an actual passing attack, unlike Michigan right now. So I think it's pretty even. I usually go with the team with more NFL draft picks, right, and more talent overall. And I think Michigan's earned that respect a little bit, but I do think this is a game that should be within the 4.5 point margin here.
Yeah, I'm looking back now. Maybe David Alano. I don't know where you would factor him in there, but he seems like he could have some sort of impact on this game. But yeah, I'm with you. That feels about right. Just again, as you mentioned, the metrics haven't really supported Illinois. The eye test at times hasn't really supported really much of either team. So 3.5. Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, I mean, they have Michigan number 33 in the country. So even though if I have doubts about Illinois based on what we're talking about here, I don't think Michigan's that much better, right? They haven't shown that. They lost at Washington, which is an okay team. I think it's probably a bowl team, but USC should have probably beaten Michigan, and they got trounced by who I think is obviously going to be a college football playoff contender here and maybe the best team in the country in Texas. But this isn't what Michigan had been under Harbaugh the last couple of years.
No, quarterback. It's a quarterback. When you're talking teams at this, I think I sent you a text this, or maybe we were talking about it somewhere. At that level, like, we shouldn't be talking about teams like Michigan. We haven't talked about Penn State, Ohio State, like those upper echelon college football teams. Like, we shouldn't be having quarterback conversations about those guys.
All right, that's all I got. I am really looking forward to seeing what happens in Nebraska at Indiana. That's a Fox game, 11 o'clock, right before Illinois. Otherwise, it's Oregon at Purdue on Friday night, UCLA, Rutgers, Wisconsin, Northwestern, USC, and Maryland, and Iowa, Michigan State. Look out for Iowa. I'm just telling you, they're going to start putting together a long streak here, and I think they're going to get in the college football playoff conversation potentially by the end of all of this. But there's no doubt, Joey, Michigan, Illinois is the game here this weekend.
Oh, yeah, it's a heck of a good game. And, you look around, the SEC's got 100 of these every week. Otherwise, you start talking about, hey, could they get a pregame show? Could a Fox Big Noon kickoff? I don't know how much you're still hoping and praying for College Game Day with the way the TV deals are structured. But it's not Big Ten Tailgate. It's in town. I will not be watching Jeremy, Oregon, and Purdue. I will be seeing Braden Trimble, J.C. Anderson, and Mount Zion against Effingham, which would be a fun game. Yeah. I think I'm probably making the right call.
You brought up the SEC, yeah. Alabama at Tennessee and Georgia at Texas. Pretty good weekend.
It's every week. It's like I just want to rant very quickly, of which I'm known to do with you, really, not so much on here. I understand that, like, you're starting to change the comfortable landscape of college athletics, and why in the world is Washington, Oregon, UCLA in the Big Ten, USC? And then you look at this, and it's just week after week. It used to be, I say it used to be, like I'm freaking your age, 50. Like there'd be like those weeks where you would see like huge games, like, oh, it's every week. It's every single week that it's just this monster game and a couple of them going on. When you get into conference play, obviously week 2 is typically like, Illinois versus Peatone or whatever the case is. But this is fun. If you're a fan and you've got all day to sit and you can go from this into that, something like that. I get it. The conference realignment can be a lot to deal with. Maybe it's not for everybody. The games are awesome. It's got what TV. It's what the TV partners wanted.
It's made everything more difficult for these schools, but the TV partners did this, as you said, for a reason. The product is unbelievable. You had Oregon, Ohio State last week. You have 2 more of those games in the SEC this week. I mean, the Big Ten really just had 3 big games a year, right? Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. Like that was it. Now with Oregon and all these other schools in there, you're going to get more of them, and you're getting other teams to improve. It is upping the game of everybody else, and they're starting to improve programs like Illinois and Indiana. Those are the 2 programs that have the best games this week in the Big Ten. Like those are the ones that have it. So, all right, that'll do it for us. Thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer Podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review, wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. Hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell. For Joey Wagner, I'm Jeremy Werner. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer Podcast.